Hey, Derek. How you doing?
Hey, Peter. How's it going?
Not too bad. What are we drinking?
It looks, I don't even know how to pronounce it. Chateau de Breuil?
It is a Calvados, which Calvados is very similar to what we know as brandy, but it is apple brandy. Do you taste a little bit of that apple in there?
I feel like I'm supposed to be sophisticated and say yes. So yes, I do. The apple really comes out.
Oh, yes, obviously.
Yeah.
I thought you were just... Are you testing me?
I get hints of pear and apple and whiskey.
Brandy is normally made from wine, but apparently brandy could be made from anything, which is why Calvados is a brandy made from apples.
It's very tasty.
Super tasty.
Yeah, our usual combination of coffee and whiskey.
I thought I'd mix things up with a little brandy.
Yeah.
So, pro tip, if you are anywhere near grocery outlet gets stuff that just doesn't sell, is about to expire. And it's cheap, which is the real reason why I go there. But the good thing about that is that every now and then they will have amazing deals on many things, including liquor. So apparently this, and I don't know how true this is.
I mean,
but
liquor's
apparently
not going to
this
expire.
bottle, yeah, liquor never expires, right? Apparently this bottle is normally $200.
Wow.
I got it for $40.
Oh, that's great.
So it's really good.
Yeah.
And yeah, feel free to pour yourself some more.
Tasty.
So what's been going on?
I recently wrote an article for Bloomberg, which Bloomberg told me did pretty well.
Really?
Yeah, they said it got a lot of clicks.
Nice.
And it was someone, shout out to Avery Trufelman, who hooked me up with this job. She was busy, I think last year. It's been a while, but she was busy some time ago. And she got an email from a Bloomberg editor, and she didn't have time for it. So then she referred me. I wrote something for Bloomberg, and then recently they reached out to me again, and they said they're doing a series on like male issues. And
so they reached out to the man with the most.
Yeah. With the most issues. They were like, this guy knows issues. He can pick from many of them. So they reached out to me and they said, do you have anything that you think would be right? And I was like, because they're throwing all these ideas around about like male enrollment in colleges or declining wages and all of this stuff. And I was like, I don't know any. I know there's like some discourse around that, but I couldn't possibly write anything on it. I only know about aesthetics. And I said I could write about what I think is a new burgeoning aesthetic online, not a dominant one, but a growing one of the alpha male aesthetic, which is this like super jacked guy, really tight clothes, speaks in these like clipped imperatives, like punching
What do you mean by clipped imperatives?
Like, I'm trying to think without this also getting clipped and then associated with me. But, sometimes on Instagram, you'll see someone like, they're like in a super tight shirt and they're like, you got to go get some money. You got to, like discipline. And there are all these like very short
phrases,
punchy phrases of how to maximize your life, maximize gains, maximize income, be super productive, so on and so forth. So there's a whole section of the internet that's like dedicated to this sort of thing, like cold plunges before you work because you're like increasing your productivity. There's the 72. I think it's, I have to admit, like when I was looking into this, I would have to like look up a lot of this information because it's not like I'm not in that kind of like sphere naturally. But I remember one is, I think it's called the 72 challenge, I believe. And it's basically this system that you do for 72 days that's about maximizing your body, your mind, and your work ethic.
Self-help, it sounds like.
There's a lot of self-help in it. So I mean, the easiest kind of example that everyone will know is Andrew Tate, because he's like you don't have to be in that sphere to know who Andrew Tate is. But then the other one that's also easy to point to is Ashton Hall, who recently went viral for the Saratoga face plunge, where he would wake up. Are you familiar with Ashton Hall?
I don't know any of these guys, actually.
Okay. So Ashton Hall recently went viral because he would do videos of his daily routine. And the daily routine consisted of him waking up at something like 4:30 a.m.
My man.
And he would take off like the kind of like facial like facial
face
products,
mask? Oh,
like
okay.
a face mask, things that would like improve his appearance. And then he would pour Saratoga bottled water into a glass
Only the
bowl
best.
and fill it with ice. And then he would dunk his face in it. Sometimes the bowl would have like fruit as well. I don't, and then he would
cucumbers naturally.
And then he would do a big workout routine, and then he would get in front of a computer and tell men that, there would be like these phrases like, you got to 10,000, we got to get to 100,000. I assume he means money, but it would be all of this like thing of like how to improve your life to get women, get money, be able to afford these like really fast cars, so on and so forth.
Okay.
So there's the reason why I don't want to point only to Andrew Tate is because Andrew Tate comes wrapped with a bunch of politics. And also there's accusations of him kidnapping women and like being involved in sex trafficking. But also online, he has this persona of doing this very performative disgust for liberal norms.
Okay.
So there's like, I don't want to make it seem like the alpha male aesthetic is only about those politics. There is a section of that world that's about those politics, but there's also, I would say, the majority of people in that sphere are just guys who are telling you how to
get jacked, get rich,
get jacked, get women, like maximize your life and be this kind of like very bulked up playboy, essentially.
It reminds me of, did you ever see Magnolia?
No.
Oh, that's a good movie. Hard to watch at times. Tom Cruise plays a terrible man, but very similar to this. He is a self-appointed guru who tells guys how to make it with women, how to make it in life, how to be successful. And you really end up disliking one of the most likable actors, with that charismatic smile. And but at the end of the movie, he does redeem himself. But it sounds like a very similar character.
Yeah, so I wrote this essay about the creation of this aesthetic, and I was drawing from previous. The funny thing is that my editor reached out to me and they said, "Do you think you can write 2,000 words on it?" And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely. I'll turn this into
2,000 words."
Like as I was writing, I looked at my word count and I was like 1,000. So I'd split it up to intro, 3 sections I wanted to talk about, which is Industrial Revolution, 1970s, 1980s aesthetics, the rise of the metrosexual, and then the conclusion, which is about this, how this all has culminated into this alpha male aesthetic. So when I was writing it, I was like halfway into, I did my intro and then I did my first section, which is about the Industrial Revolution. And I did my word count and I was like, oh, it's around like already like I'm around 1,200 or like 1,500.
Just after the intro.
And then I emailed my editor. I said, does it have to be exactly 2,000? And she said, no, it's fine to go over. And then I was like, okay, great. So then I wrote the whole thing and it was like super long. It was like 4,500. And I was like, okay, this doesn't work. So I trimmed it down to 3,700, submitted it. And my editor was incredibly patient, sent me a revision and looked at all this stuff like we're cutting here. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, I can trim this word. I can trim that word. And then we went back and forth because there were these entire sections that I really fought for. There were things that I was able to save, but there were things like, there was things about the Industrial Revolution that my editor was like, what are you talking about?
It all
what
goes
is the
back
point of this section?
To the Industrial Revolution.
So then I was like, no, it's really important for me to talk about this section. And then he brought in other editors from Bloomberg who had to come in and was like, and they would be like, no, this is
crazy.
What does this have to do with anything? And then they would bring in other editors. And I was like, listen, I need to get paid. I cannot this is not like a workable persona that I'm doing. So I have to be like, okay. So we eventually cut it down. They were incredibly patient, incredibly talented. They really polished up the piece to where I think it was much better than my original long-winded thing.
Man, not to butt in, but I was impressed by the length as it was online.
Yeah, because there was a lot of sections. So, for example, my argument was basically that our aesthetics are shaped by shifting tectonic plates of politics, economics, and technology. So when we think of the alpha male aesthetic, again, the most obvious example is Andrew Tate, but I don't want people to think that the alpha male aesthetic is really just about Andrew Tate. There's a huge ecosystem that full of like really big influencers with millions and millions of followers, but they just don't get the attention of Andrew Tate because Andrew Tate is much more
Seems to be
controversial.
more of a lightning rod.
Yeah, he's like a lightning rod. So, but if you actually go into that world, you'll find a lot of characters who are really, they do this whole performance, but they don't necessarily have the controversial politics. So I just want to separate that out. I don't want people to think that these are one and the same.
He's one of, but not indicative of.
Yes. Yeah. Not completely representative of. So the first section is about Eugene Sandow and during the Industrial Revolution. And one of I had sections in there. I had sections in there about how the Industrial Revolution, what it was like for workers. And I was like, this is what I love about it. And then I talked about camping during the Industrial Revolution. And my editor was like, what does camping have to do? Like, none of these people even camp. And I was like, listen, it's really important to talk about camping. The reason why I want to talk about camping and conditions during the Industrial Revolution is, again, the thesis is that our aesthetics are shaped by politics, economics, and technology. And the section that made it in, which is, I think, the most important section, is this Prussian German strongman named Eugene Sandow. He immigrated into England, and he was, like there were many strong men of the day, and they were, they're like performers. They would perform feats of strength. They were kind of like on stage or whatever.
Carnivals.
Yeah, carnivals. And Eugene Sandow originally made his name by going around cafes and breaking strength testing machines. Wow. And then he would challenge strongmen of his day. Like he would go to a theater where a strongman was performing, and Eugene Sandow would wear this like really big suit that would hide his body. And then he would stand up and be like, I challenge you to blah, blah, blah. And then he would go onto stage and then
tear off his clothes.
And he'd tear off his clothes. And so like people thought that he was like just some normal, some like normal dude. And he'd tear off his clothes and he'd turn out to be this hulking figure. And then he would challenge this other strongman, often beating them to feats of strength. But his fame really took off when he partnered with this Broadway kind of manager who toured him around the world, and they made his body into an allegory for various things.
I'm sure manliness.
Yeah, so like manliness, and there was at the time there were many challenges to British supremacy around the world, the British Empire. So he would do these like stage acts where Eugene Sandow and women and children and some civilians, British civilians, would be fleeing from like a Boer assault, which were these kind of Boer republics in Africa. They're fleeing from these Boer soldiers, and they would come across a ravine, and Eugene Sandow would lower his body and act as a human bridge for these women, children, and civilians to cross his like broad back across this ravine. Wow. So it was both an actual show of strength. Like he had all of these like amazing feats of strength where he would get behind a horse, and they had a rope around the horse, and he would lift up the horse with one hand.
What?
So there were all these like allegories of how his body could support the British Empire and save people.
Sounds like Captain America, basically.
Yeah, exactly like Captain America. And as his fame grew, he started to capitalize on it. So he came out with these spring-loaded dumbbells that you could purchase through mail order. He had cocoa powder-based tonics that were kind of like a early kind of like health tonic that you could take. He had cigars. He had branded cigars. He had a huge line of merch. And he also opened up a gym in the Piccadilly district of London.
That must have been one of the first gyms ever, because gyms are relatively recent.
Yes. It was not only was it one of the first like kind of like health club gyms, but it was upscale. So you would go in and you would consult with an employee there. It would be like a consultation, and then they would create a bespoke workout plan for you. Okay. And then you would go into a private room where you do a workout, and then there were like the private saunas.
Like a personal trainer.
Yeah, like a personal trainer, exactly. And by placing the gym in an upscale Piccadilly district, like if you've been interested in menswear for a while,
I gave it some prestige.
Yeah,
I'm sure at that time, working out, especially guys working out, similar to Venice Beach at the time, and it's much more recent. This is in the 60s. It became a lewd. It was viewed as lewd.
Yes.
And what are all these men doing?
Yes.
But placing it in an upscale place, I suppose, was on purpose in order to give it some kind of semblance of, what would you call it?
Well, I think it's the easiest way to think of working out and bodybuilding culture at the time is to contrast it with, this is in the late 1800s. So the easiest way to think of it is to go back to the beginning of the century and to understand that at the time, because of the Romanticism movement, the ideal male figure was
waif-like,
pale, thin,
more reasoning and intellectual.
Yeah, I had a line in there about the ideal male figure was basically someone who was pale, frail, and touched by consumption. Touched by consumption. Consumption was the term for tuberculosis at the time. Yeah. Tuberculosis, I think, in the 1800s. 25% of deaths in Europe
wiped out a lot of people.
Was due to tuberculosis. But also touched by consumption, meaning that this was a gentleman whose concerns were basically shopping. Right?
Right.
So this was kind of like a figure of kind of like melancholic intellectual figure who didn't work out very much. And working out, visible muscle signaled that you were a member
laborer,
of
commoner.
Of the lower classes.
Yeah.
Like the only reason why you have those muscles is because you're like working the railroads, or you're like you earn your living off of your muscle.
Yeah.
So so by the close of the century, Eugene Sandow turned visible muscle from a kind of lowly thing to something to demonstrate self-mastery, discipline.
Patriotism as well.
Patriotism, to show masculinity.
Yeah.
So many of the bourgeois kind of hopped onto it. They saw it as like something to demonstrate that you were a more kind of refined person, that you were not only refined in intellect, but you were also refined in physical form.
Okay.
This idea of sport, Bruce Boyer actually has written multiple essays about around this period, a lot of menswear was popularized through sport because sport had become much more prestigious. Well, certain sports, right? Like the gentlemanly sports were considered, a demonstration of class. So like when we think of sports today, like you can definitely see like tennis, polo are considered like sophisticated.
Yeah.
And we had the same ideas back in the close of the 1800s. So I wrote that. And the reason why I included camping was because Rachel Gross's book, Shopping All the Way in the Woods, I thought was a fantastic book. And she talks in there about how at the time, camping also became
romanticized,
a romanticized thing.
Yeah.
So
getting back to feral masculinity.
Yes. So before the Industrial Revolution, if you were working on a farm, there was no real romanticism of like this lifestyle, because this is just like what you do on a daily basis, right? This is like your life. Yeah. So when you think of the forest, you think of like bears, like death around the corner. Whereas once everyone was tied to the city, and during the Industrial Revolution, where you had all of this pollution and people are sitting at their desk, all of a sudden the wilderness...
Or slaving away at their industrial job.
Yes. The woods was no longer a place of place of danger. It was a place to demonstrate self-mastery. So Rachel Gross goes into this whole history of how men would construct these identities and go, they'd be working away at their desk job, surrounded by factories, and they would take moments to go camping, and they would do all of the stuff, like they'd build their own fire, or they'd kill an animal.
Pitch a tent.
Pitch a tent to show like...
Start a fire.
I'm connecting to my like authentic masculine self. And they'd go back and they'd tell their buddies, and their buddies like, wow, you are like super cool. And, you're like, you've gained some clout, essentially.
Right.
That section got cut. That section got cut. The reason why I fought for it is because I wanted, there are other sections that got cut in there, like the rise of Kodak.
What?
I wanted to emphasize that Eugene Sandow is working in this environment where Kodak and photography technology helped propel his image, so that you didn't have to just go to the
Kodak
stage.
At that time? Really?
It's in the late 1800s is when photography started to take off.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yes. So, and by having his photograph taken and distributed through all of this popular media, people could see that there was a macho masculine figure who would pose in these like Greek statuesque kind of poses, and that he represented something to be desired. Something to aspire to.
Right.
Many people went through these whole programs, and of course, they never became Eugene Sandow, right? Like it's just like it is today.
Yeah, a little bit of DNA involved in that.
Yeah. So that was the whole plan for the first section, to drive home this idea that Eugene Sandow's rise depended on.
Want to hear the rest? Listen to the full episode and many more other exclusive episodes over on our Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Blamo to sign up and join the Blam fam. You also get access to our exclusive members-only Slack group where we chat about this and a ton of other things. So head over to patreon.com/Blamo and we'll see you there.